Hi, everyone. It's Kelly from The Hub here today with our friend Sue Oswald, who knows everything about glass and more. Hello there, Sue. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. And she's very humble about her glass knowledge, and she knows a lot about a lot of other things too. But we are tapping her brain for glass because glass is really one of those mediums that, well, I mean, who does glass? I mean, everybody paints, and I'm not saying everybody, but everybody paints, everybody sculpts. They don't. But glass is really unusual. And so last time we sort of got into Sue's head and we, figured out why she does it and all that stuff. And today we're going to learn about all the ways you do glass, not blowing it, because that's a whole other level. Um, I we talked privately about this before, and we both love this show that's on Netflix called Blown Away. And if you haven't watched that, let's just say that's how you blow glass.
Yeah, that's a great show. Love that.
They,
Amazing artist.
if you've never seen it before, it's a reality show, but don't use that word because it's not like that. In the same vein of like old school Project Runway and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, where people blow glass and compete against each other with a certain category. And I think they're so good that if a regular person tried to do that, they would just laugh at themselves and just walk right out of
They
the
make it
glass
look
studio.
easy, but on the show, there's crashes. You hear the glass crashing, and oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Sue starts with a finished piece. And that could be anything, right? Like how do you pick?
That's it. Perfect word. I'm a picker.
Aha. Do you use old or new? I guess.
I will do both. I mean, if somebody needs a specific piece, I'll go find a new piece. I prefer the vintage, the older stuff, the Scandinavian, the Danish, of course, and there's so much glass out there. Flea markets, I mean, you find it buried, dusty, scratched. So for me, as long as there's no huge chip out of it, it'll work. And the thicker, the better. Gives me something to cut into with the sandblasting.
Aha. So after we were done last time, I said to myself, I'm not sure I know enough about all this glass stuff. And I did. I researched it, once a student, always a student, once a teacher, always a teacher. And there's a lot of things you do with glass. I always say that Sue sandblasts. And so I think of it as real sand that comes out of a nozzle and comes at it so hard that it chips away at the glass, which
That's
is
it.
sand anyway. I mean, that's glass what glass is. So,
Basically, that's it.
oh, well, there you
Not with
go.
sand though.
So, do you use sand?
No, I began with aluminum oxide, which is a very fine powder. Hard to believe that something that fine would bite into glass, but it does. And then I switched to silicon carbide recently because it's a harder material. It doesn't break down as fast. The more you blast with it, the finer it gets. Like my sandblaster recycles the medium that I blast with. So I can keep using it and using it and using it. But as
Oh,
I
okay.
do that, it gets finer and finer and dustier until I dump it and get a new batch.
And do you like that the material that you use breaks down? Like, why do you like it when it gets finer? Does it have advantages?
The when it eats into the glass, bites into the glass, um, the bigger, the coarser the granules, the more texture you'll see on the surface of the glass where it ate into the glass.
Oh,
So the
oh,
finer it gets, the smoother that cut is until it looks like it was almost acid etched into it. Yeah. But by
Okay.
the time it gets to that point, you have to get rid of your medium because it's just so dusty, you can't even see what you're looking at.
Okay.
The
So,
thing clouds up, even though there's a big exhaust unit on it, it gets cloudy in there.
right. And for people who have needed, might need another frame of reference, it would be like sawdust.
Mm-hmm.
Chunks of wood coming out if you're using whatever, if using some other kind of way to chunk up wood rather than sawdust coming out that is much finer and that kind of a stuff. Aha. Okay. So there's glass. You could cut it, and that's cut glass. And people, how do you cut glass? How do you do that?
I guess there's basically, there's probably more because I've only scratched the surface. No pun intended.
It's all good.
I'm just, as much as I know, there's like 100 times that much more information out there. And like you, I keep learning and learning. So basically, I guess back in the day, they used wheels. And if you go on YouTube, there's amazing artists with diamond coated wheels and copper wheels, and that literally cuts into the glass. And one by one, they drag it along these wheels, and they make these amazing detailed. And they're still doing this. I mean, it's not like this
Yeah.
is old.
And you can feel that when you buy cut glass, you can feel the difference between, okay, then what's the other one? Pressed?
Okay. So there's what I do, which is sandblasting. I mean, these are all in pre-made glass forms. You need the actual glass to begin with to do this.
Yeah.
And then there's mine, which is sandblasting. And I've kind of gotten this to the point where I can get different values.
Right. And I think you can see some of those P's. Some of them are clear. Some of them are lighter. They're right. They're at different gradations of frosting.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So by changing my pressure, by changing the time that I blast, by changing the distance between the gun and the glass, all those variables, I can get all these different values. So that's a way of engraving into the glass. Wheel cutting is a way of engraving. And the last is to actually draw on the glass itself with some sort of a tool. And this is hand engraving. That's my tool. And then this is actually a dental tool. So the end spins around, and right at the end, there's like a little diamond tip on that, and you can draw right into the glass. And I think I did that to add detail to, it's a big piece. I don't know if you can see. When you get into the flower area, there's very fine lines there to kind of add.
So those are
These are sandblasted first,
tool.
and then all those fine lines, I added detail. But literally, I mean, hand engravers that use these tools do amazing things. Amazing things, like Leslie Pike and Jill Quinn Babcock, and there's like thousands of others out there.
Because you could literally paint, sort of. You could literally like make a painting on glass by by carving it out that way.
Yeah, it's just like drawing, only you think backwards. When you draw into the glass, it gets white instead of darker. So it's kind of like scratchboard for anyone that's done scratchboard.
So this is a very interesting parallel. I did a series with my father who does lathe work. And we've talked about, in art, you either are adding things or you're removing things. And I'd never thought about it that way. And your brain works differently when you're adding or you're removing.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a reductionist. He's a remover. And you are the same way. You have to think about that you are always taking something away, and that if you mess up, you can't add it back. it's, once it's gone, it's gone.
You just keep going.
Right. You just have to adjust based on that, using that same technique, which is fascinating because I think, and clay is sort of like that, but clay is,
Clay goes both ways.
yeah. Because because if you're like throwing a pot and you mess up, well, you can swoosh it and start all over again, and it's a lot easier.
Push it, recycle bin, reconstitute, and it's back on your wheel.
Right. Yeah. Clay's a lot more forgiving. But you're right. When you're carving away, when you're essentially sculpting, because that's what you're doing with either with wood or with marble or with glass, that it's a whole other process. And you're right. You have to think about that in that way. And I know that you've got pieces that are, the design is either in relief or it's the design that you make. So you're also thinking upside down that way as well. Do you want the design to be there, or do you want it to be in relief? And so you have to figure out, what are you going to take away and what are you going to keep to get the result that you wanted?
That's a perfect explanation. I mean, I either cover it and then cut away and remove what I want to blast, or I cut out the pieces and I apply them to the glass. And then those are the pieces that becomes the focus of your design. Yeah. Yes.
For those of you whose brains have a hard time working that way, sort of like mine, you really have to sit and plan it before you're just willy-nilly with tools.
Yeah, which is really I like willy-nilly sometimes. I just like going off and doing things. And I can't do that. I think it through. I see it in my head. I imagine what it will look like in the end. And sometimes I'll reverse gears if I'm fortunate enough. Like sometimes you go too far and there's no going back and changing your mind.
Yep.
But yeah, I have the option of reversing every once in a while and then coming at it from a different direction.
When I think about this, like the way that your brain works with some of this stuff, my old teacher self jumps in, because I think that there are those people who don't really get how a lot of art works, and they think you're just fiddle farting around with paint and crap, and they don't really understand the amazing amount of planning and organization and math and brain workings to understand how you can create something that has nothing to do with fiddle farting around. It's a significant amount of brain power to make that work.
I have sketchbooks here full of, I'll draw an idea and then I'll put tracing paper on top of it and I'll alter the idea. I'll go back and look at it, alter it again, and then finally till I come out with, the final idea where I think it's going to be. And still I've cut away the blasting medium and redone a spot because I went to bed and I couldn't sleep thinking about, I screwed that up.
Right.
I can make it work. No.
Right. And and there could be a different approach to get what you need to get. Right. And this stuff isn't cut and dry. And it's trial and error.
It is. So I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it's been, knock on wood, a long time since I've made a major error where I've blown through a piece of glass. I've blown through glass. Put holes where there shouldn't be holes.
Through it. Yeah. And so, and that's sort of interesting as well, because one of my father, when he does his wood stuff, he likes burls and things that have holes in them, and spalting, like things that have like ant trails and stuff through them, because it looks really cool. And there are people who look at some of his stuff and say, but what do you do with it? And he says, it just is. It's not about using it.
Mm-hmm.
And that also makes me curious about glass. So can you put a hole through something and salvage it and make it still be as cool and interesting and unique as because of that hole?
I suppose there's something out there. I've used a mix that you can fill like errors with, because I've had a couple of chips and pieces that I just couldn't, they were just too intricate to get away. And I filled, but once a hole is in a piece, especially if it's a vase, a vase, or a bowl, something that you want to hold water.
Yeah, not anymore.
Unless you want it really lacy and it's not going to be functional anymore. I mean, one of these days I'll try intentionally putting holes all over something. Not really my thing, but
Yeah,
I mean, it could be fun if you really wanted to do that.
yeah. So we're talking about, so this, like, the overall kind of work that you do is etching, and there's lots of different kinds of ways to etch. And
Mhm.
one of the ways is also, you are the sandblast, like using a particle to etch,
Mhm.
the sandblasting technique. I was reading that you can also use solvents to etch, like you use chemicals to etch.
Yeah,
So is it like a liquid?
it's pasty. Yeah, not hard paste, but it's a thicker liquid, and you apply it with a brush. Same concept. I mean, you mask off the area where you don't want engraved. It doesn't etch deeply. It pretty much frosts the surface of the glass.
Okay.
But you can get a really nice image, and I've used it if I want different textures on a piece. I'll sandblast an area, or if I want to soften an area, I'll go back and put the acid in there. And
So I guess, are people who do glass in your way use lots of different techniques? Or are people more like, I'm a chemical etcher? Like, do you stay in your lane, or like, it sounds like you do the sandblasting kind, the chemical kind, and the drawing kind?
yeah, for me, it's all about the image. I mean,
Okay.
whatever makes the image, the final design work. I guess there's a comfort level. If you're comfortable with the acid, do it. I mean, if you're comfortable, the sandblasting is cumbersome and toxic, and there's fumes, and there's an investment in the equipment. It's not cheap. So I can understand where somebody might be if they're a hobbyist or something, and they just, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Art in
Right.
any form, go get it. But yeah, if you want to do this, you have to make the investment.
So next time when we talk with Sue, we're not done talking with her yet. Don't get worried. Next time when we talk, we're gonna do like the whole sandblasting thing from soup to nuts, and she's gonna show us all of her like equipment and show us all of her stuff, like how she does it. And feel free, if you want to talk about, you're like, sometimes you search through, you ask a friend to borrow this one, and sometimes you buy it. We can talk about all those parts as well. So show us some of the pieces and how you do it, so that we have some good visuals to sort of attach to some of the stuff that we learned.
Okay, so let's see. I just finished this. I should have something black to put behind it. This isn't going to show up well. Give me a second here. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Unprepared. There we go.
Well, that'll work.
Now it's a little easier to see.
Oh, okay. So it's leaves on the outside and flowers in the middle. And then you did border work as well. Okay. So what techniques did you use to get that design?
So this is all sandblasting. I haven't done anything else on here, although the centers of this is ground covered dogwood. I like to research different kinds I love nature and organic things and moving, swirling lines. So this is ground covered dogwood, which I didn't even know existed. And in the centers of the flowers, those little circles,
Yeah.
there's actually little black dots. Now I'm going to put those in there. On occasion, you can buy bake-on enamels, which after it's all done, let it set 24 hours, stick it in your oven, 325 for 40 minutes. It bakes on tough enough that you can put it in a dishwasher.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm going to put little black dots in the middle of all those little white things. And then that's how this one will finish up. So it adds a little something, something. I hesitate. I mean, you can add, I could add green in here and everything else, but then
Right.
for me, it becomes less about the blasting and more
Yep.
about the color.
Right.
And I really love clear glass.
And I think that that's really interesting because you've said this previously. It's about the design for you. Okay, so what you don't know about Sue, she also paints. Okay, her paintings are really beautiful. So
Oh, thanks.
I think because you are adept at other medium, it's interesting that I don't know. I think it's just fascinating. You really try to keep your glass pure.
I do.
You don't really use, and you said this, you don't really use colored glass.
On occasion, I love the black glass, and I'm looking at a green piece. Excuse me.
Sure.
I just finished this. Now it's going to have some more work done.
Oh,
I have to
wow.
polish up.
But even though that is a piece of colored glass, the
It stays that
design,
color.
yeah, that's gorgeous. But that is the color of that plant.
Right.
So that's
Yeah, I really don't go too far from.
Yeah, but that's fascinating because I even see that as clear glass, even though it isn't, because that design goes with that color. So it's not like you did, I don't know, butterflies on that. You did a thing that shows up like that naturally. So it feels totally like that is still clear glass.
It's like the glass says something. In the beginning, I used to come up with cool things that I thought would be cool designs in glass. Irrelevant, not looking at the piece I was putting it on. It was about, this was my idea. And
Right.
Now I look at the form of the glass and I think about the form and I think about the color and I think about how that drives the design. So that process kind of reversed over time.
That's so cool. My father does the same thing with wood. And so when you say that, like, he will have a piece of wood and sometimes he'll look at something and go, yeah, I got nothing. And sometimes he'll take it and he'll show me and he goes, well, what can I do with this? I've looked at this piece of wood for 10 years. It's been sitting in the basement. What do I do? And I would go, oh, well, why don't you just try it? And then he gets a little grouchy because he's looked at that damn piece of wood for 100 years and he's got nothing. And he's like,
there it is.
Right. That, and it's because, he's my father. So I've been, we've been looking at wood together for my whole life. And that's fascinating that the glass is telling you what it wants to be. And I think that that's so cool.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so along that design thing, I know we're talking about the whole process, but I think that the design is so interesting too. How do you, pull another piece out. Oh, pull the pea pod one out.
Pea pod. Got it.
How did pea pods go on that piece? Like, how did that show up that way?
So you're looking at a cylinder, which isn't really talking to you a whole lot.
Right. In terms of a piece of glass, that's boring.
Right. And then I thought about how, I wanted something progressing around the edge. That's sort of the movement. It was dancing around the edge. Pea pods, no clue. That's my wacky brain just going, boy, I bet that would be interesting and different values. And I could do the lines on the outside. So I've done asparagus.
Oh,
I mean, that's I think that's at a gallery now. I did asparagus around a mug and he just looked at it and went, yeah, that makes sense. Asparagus around a big mug. Yeah. But I mean, the tops of them, I look at
Yeah.
objects and I think, boy, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. Those little tops, and then the stems come down and there's spikes, and yeah.
It's pea pod showed up for you, and that's how
Dancing
that
pea
worked.
pod.
That's how that worked. Awesome. Okay, so we've talked about how you can draw on glass with the fancy dental tool
Drill. Mm-hmm.
or a Dremel,
Mm-hmm.
but that would be a whole different
Yep.
way you do it.
There's my crusty Dremel.
There we go. I like that tools that are used just have love, all just a tool of love.
Very much so.
And chemical etching and sandblasting. So we have to talk about your favorite and my favorite too, which is Lalique.
Yes.
We've talked a little bit about Lalique last time because we were both so gaga about his stuff. And I just wanted to show you guys, the audience, some Lalique that is the reason why I got excited about glass. And well, let's just show, and then you can tell all the stuff when you went to France and you learned all about and all your stuff. So let me share my screen and we can see what everybody gets excited about. All right, so this is Lalique jewelry. This is a necklace. Do you want to talk about his jewelry stuff? Actually, let me do a slideshow like you're supposed to do it. I actually called it a little Lalique because I'm so cute. Okay, there we go. What is the glass on this?
Oh. He started in the beginning, he used gems and very Art Nouveau.
Yeah.
And combined materials. And then he started to use glass where the pieces are molded and cast. So those look like opals.
Yeah.
And the purple gemstone amethyst, is that it?
Yeah. And then he's got these
enameled.
Yeah, these like crane swans. Yeah, probably cranes. Yeah, which is very typical of the whole like Art Nouveau movement.
He loved nature. He loved the human figure. He loved, I mean, he's done glass with grasshoppers on it, squirrels. Yeah, birds.
Wow. So when I was looking at stuff, this struck me, and I thought, Sue knows how this stuff is.
Oh, it's got to be an iridescent piece of glass to begin with to get the glowing blue.
Yeah.
But to get the bubbles in it, and then he developed all sorts of groundbreaking glass forming methods. And one was to he molded glass, but it wasn't just pouring molten glass into a mold. He would put it in and then he would blow it to fill the mold. And then he'd go back and he'd work on it again. It was going to the museum that had all of his pieces was just awe-inspiring. And I sort of found him because I started engraving and etching and sandblasting. And I would come up with an idea, and then I'd go back and research and be looking, online at different things. And I would find it, and I was like, oh my God, he did this. And we began to parallel the ideas. And then I thought, all right, now, did I see his first?
I mean, the bubbles are placed in a way that it makes hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this from sculptors. I don't know this because I've ever done it before, but hands and feet are always complicated things and they're hard to make them look right. And so he didn't have to worry about that. He just shut away hands and feet, and no one pays attention to that because you're like, it's like a sculpture painting. How do you even make glass look like that?
And they so look like they're moving in the water, and yeah, yeah,
It's unreal.
it is.
And so this is another piece that I saw that I thought, oh, I think that when you just look at this, if you're not really sort of paying attention, you're like, yeah, you just like glue these little seahorses on this little glass piece, you're done. And the answer to that is not even remotely close.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I have not seen this particular piece in person, so I can't even venture a guess. It's got to be molded. It's got to be, and then gone back afterwards and stained and acid etched for the horses to be, they look frosted.
Yep.
So I'm guessing an acid with a, and then I know he stained to add color to pieces, or like you said, those could have been the first thought and
Yep.
a yellowish glass, but no, I'm thinking, and then, yeah.
And the way that the glass is blown to have this be a uniform piece it's outrageous. That
Yeah.
it's sculpted so that these seahorses can be there. It's it makes my head explode trying to figure out, how do you create this from a medium that is so challenging and so delicate? And so, I mean, I would think it also seems like a stubborn medium. Is it stubborn?
It is.
Yeah.
It very much has a personality that, I mean, although it takes on different, I mean, when it's melted, it's molten and it can be sculpted and formed and cast. But once it's set, it's to sand it and refine it and remove a scratch is like you're fighting with it.
Yep. And then this is the piece that started it all for me. This was the piece that I first saw in the Corning Museum, and this was absolutely designed in the 20s, 30s to be a hood ornament for your car. And this piece is exquisite.
It is.
Her
it really is.
face,
I saw that.
it's, I mean, and she's screaming. When you see her head on, I mean, she looks best on from the side, but when you see her head on, she's screaming as her face is being, right into the wind on the front of my Rolls Royce.
And you get that feeling, the speed, the motion,
yeah,
blowing her back.
yeah.
Love
This made me say, Lalique, who?
Yeah.
I didn't know you could make glass that could turn into that.
Mm. Yeah,
And
he was a genius.
so can I, not that you have to know all of like his insides and outsides, but this is sculpted.
Mm-hmm. So he made a model first. You make a model and then you make a mold from the model. And then you pour the glass into the mold. And then he would go back and either polish or acid etch if he wanted it frosted. But he did so much more. I mean, that's like overly simplifying
Right.
what he did. I saw the actual molds. I saw the prototypes for different pieces. It was, yeah, it was awe-inspiring to see the work for real. And Corning I was up in Corning ages ago to take a class, and I went through the museum quickly, which was my bad. But going back, I have to go back. I have to go back because they have a huge collection of Rene Lalique's work.
They do. And I think one of the things that, I mean, we all know Corning because our moms had the white ones with the little blue flowers on the side. And or if your mom didn't, she had a different version of the same thing that both Sue and my mom had. And so you don't think about that as you think about that is what Corning is. And you're like, why in heck would you go to a museum for hard Tupperware? That just seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
But because you forgot that that's what the outside face of what Corning has become. Corning has been doing so many different variants of glass work for so many different industries for more than 100 years.
Yeah.
And that's what's, and because of that, they are our, I mean, yes, Sue had a lovely time and a fantastic voyage going to France to do this. You can go to mid-state New York and be able to see not as cool stuff though.
Oh,
very cool stuff.
They have people working there 24/7 in the studios, and you can take classes there, and they have exhibits there. And yeah, I can't speak more highly enough for it. And I'm definitely scheduling a return visit there as soon as it's possible.
So this was really cool today because we talked about all the different ways that you can do it and some of your examples and some of your, I don't know, can we call him your mentor? He doesn't know that he's your mentor.
I think Bob Blanchard was sort of, he was.
He's your mentor.
Kickoff man, definitely.
Yeah. But, do you want to show his piece that sort of got you into it? So tell us again who he is and how you know him.
Mr. Robert Blanchard was a teacher at William Allen High School with back in the day, it was 2 or 3 others. Now it's a huge department. And he was a potter, but he could also do jewelry. He was a woodworker. He still is. I don't know why I'm using past tense.
I was going to say he's still alive. Yeah.
And at one of his shows, one of his pottery shows in his barn, this caught my eye. He had done with a couple other teachers out there. They called themselves Facets. They had done some glass. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, love at first sight sort of thing. The reflections, the engravings, this is cut in here incredibly deep. We're talking 1/4 inch.
Wow.
At some spots where the glass is really thick. And what that does is when you view it from the reverse side, that cut in catches the light and does bizarre reflective, it's just, yeah. So I purchased this because this was a small piece in my budget. What is it, about 8 inches tall? But that was my inspiration to work. And I work very differently from him. I mean, for him, it was about the sculptural qualities of cutting into the glass. For me, it's the image and the design and the values. I mean, kind of like I love black and white photography.
Yep.
So it's a very
it's similar. Yeah, it's
zones 1 through 4 for those of you who are Ansel Adams fans. 1 through 5, very high key. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's so cool. But that's neat how those. I mean, talk about a dramatically different medium, but the influence that you have in photography, I'm pretty sure even a novice like me can look at that and go, oh, now I see how that all connects into
that away.
Yeah. But that's cool. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
For all of you who are excited to get into the nuts and bolts and you were hoping we were doing it here, just I had to tease you a little bit because we got to learn all the parts first. And then Sue's going to take us from, like we talked about before, from the beginning till the end. Might take a couple of episodes depending on how excited we get when we're in the middle of doing all of our sandblasting. But stay tuned for next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
This was really great. See you, everybody.